Hello, everybody. We're just waiting for everybody to filter in here today. If you get a chance, introduce yourself in the chat. All of our comments and our questions will be in the chat function today as well, so be sure to use that. Just going to wait for a couple more minutes here. My name is Peter Houston. I am the project manager for the Great Lakes Islands Alliance. Welcome to our first 2023 expert webinar series. Today, successful island survey methodology featuring Kirk Corkery from Amherst Island. And so welcome to here joining us today. And I see some people coming in the chat there. So just say who you are, where you're from, what island you live on, or what organization you're a part of. Let's give it a few more minutes. I don't know about you, but the beautiful spring weather has arrived and winter has been given the door.
Washington Island is in Door County, so
That's right.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome. Generally speaking, right around Valentine's Day, you usually can be assured that you're right in the middle of winter. So it's pretty unusual for these warmer temperatures. Basically have kept any ice from forming, and now people are getting antsy for spring. All right, well, here we are. I will get started. We got people in the chat. If you would just introduce yourself and where you're from. My name is Peter Houston. I am the project manager for the Great Lakes Islands Alliance. And welcome to our first webinar for 2023, Successful Island Survey Methodology, featuring Kirk Corkery from Amherst Island, facilitated by Will Craig. Here's a little brief outline of what we'll be doing today. We'll just have a little welcome here. What my job is to talk a little bit about Great Lakes Islands Alliance, as well as to talk about what our mission is. And then after I finish talking, we'll turn it over to Will Craig, who will introduce our speaker today and facilitate any questions or comments you have as time goes on. And then we'll have a question and answer at the end. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me in the chat or send me an email at phouston@stewardshipnetwork.org. All right. As I mentioned, if you do have comments or questions today, please use our chat function. Some of you have been putting your names in there, and we would appreciate you just entering any questions or comments you have in the chat function. It just works out easier for us all. So about the Great Lakes Islands Alliance, of course, we've been in as an alliance since 2017, and we were very excited to be starting our 2023 year series of webinars here. Our mission is to encourage relationship building, foster information exchange, leverage our resources to address shared challenges, and embrace opportunities to benefit islands. And what that means when you boil it right down is that we're here to hear about your challenges. We're here to share your successes. And today's webinar is a perfect example of a great challenge and a success that was taken on by the Amherst Island Alliance when they were looking to be able to provide more information for their community. Today, the 2023 GLIA members are represented here on our map. We're really excited to be able to have about 20 islands all participating in the Great Lakes Islands Alliance. From Madeline Island in Lake Superior, all the way to Wolf and Howe and Amherst in the east end of Ontario. What do we do? Well, the Great Lakes Islands Alliance is all about providing information sharing and connection. We have these regular webinars, but we also meet as a membership once every month on the first Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. And if you would like to be able to be included and you haven't asked us to put you on our email list, just put that in the chat. We'll make sure to add you to our next member meeting that will be coming up not so far away, just in a couple of weeks. So what we're trying to do is to be able to provide some advocacy and influence for our member islands, to be able to reach out to other organizations that are doing similar things or have similar goals. And one of the most important things we do is to be able to provide data and research for our member island folks. A lot of times those things are things that have come from other sources, or they may have been pertinent to something that was from one island or another, and we try to put those on our website, which is GLIA GLIALLIANC.org, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And we're very focused on environmental stewardship and sustainability of our community. So I think that you'll see that we're very much an organization that helps you to be able to reach your goals, or to be able to find other people who maybe help you reach those goals. Again, here's our contact information. That is my name and my email address, as well as our website. Please reach out to us, like us on Facebook. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Will Craig. Will's been one of our most long-term members, and he has a great insight into this whole process of surveys. So, Will, if you would introduce yourself, I will stop my share.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so I'm Will Craig. I'm a retired academic. It's got a summer place in the old 1870s farm on Washington Island. And I just love this organization. I love island life. Our speaker today, Kirk Corkery, is in a similar situation. He, from what I can tell from looking at his bio, spent a lot of his career in the capitals, big cities in Canada, Montreal and Toronto. But now has settled into island life on Amherst Island. Go back and look at the places where he worked. He's a retired executive corporate director, has worked around the world, including Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Sydney, London. And he also lists Hong Kong in there. So he's been an island guy for quite a while. He got tired, it looks to me, of living in the big city. He could hear mothers disciplining their children. He could know what the neighbor was having for dinner, the smells, and it was just time to get away from it all. So the last 6 years, he's happily lived on Amherst Island, his dog Shadow, where the only disciplining sounds come from ewes to lambs, and at dinner time when he can watch deer nibble on the fruit trees along his driveway. This is a quote from him. He spends a lot of time volunteering for organizations, and one of the things he has done is to lead a volunteer effort on Amherst Island to help the island identify what its top priorities are for moving forward. And to do this, he did a survey, and I have to say it's not easy to do a survey. It's, if you stand on a corner and handing out $100 bills, that's one thing. But if you've got people who are spread around and busy, and you're asking them, you know, what do they want for, what would they like to have in 10 years that would make this life better? It's it's not easy. So the first part is coming up with a survey that sort of lists out what are some of the options that people have been talking about. And the other is to get enough responses back so that you can actually believe the results that you've gotten. I'll point to some of the people in this call might remember the picture of Harry Truman standing on the back of a club car, which is the back end of a Pullman train, holding up the Chicago Tribune. The headline says, "Dewey wins presidency." That was based on a survey the Chicago Tribune did. And it turned out it had a bias sample. It had 1 million people respond to it, but it didn't matter because they weren't talking to the people across the country. So doing a good survey is tough, and Kirk has done it. And I'd like Kirk to step in and tell us, what did he do and how did he do it? Kirk.
Thank you, Will. Good afternoon, everybody. You're talking about that picture with the paper and Dewey wins. All I could think of was lies, damn lies, and statistics. But let's talk about what we did, and hopefully it's of use to everybody. A little bit of background first. Amherst Island, we're about the size of Manhattan. We lie about 20 minutes west of Kingston, so the very east end of Lake Ontario. We're lucky in that we have ferry service hourly. Starts at 6 in the morning. The last one comes across at 1 o'clock at night, and the ferry sits here on the island until the next morning. In terms of population on the island, we've got 4,000 sheep or so, a couple hundred cattle, lots of wildlife. Will's right. Especially in the fall, the deer come down and start nibbling at the trees along my driveway, which is, I find, very, very calming. We also have some preserves here, or reserves here for wildlife. We have 11 different varieties of owls, especially the snowy owl. And we're a world international breeding ground for them. We also, unfortunately, have 26 of the wind turbines that were installed in 2018. In terms of people, about 450 permanent, and about somewhere 650 to 700 when you add the seasonals in, which becomes a bit of an issue when you start dealing with some of the municipalities, because the seasonal people matter as much as the permanent people do, and they don't always get recognized in the government census. One other thing in terms of the island, I can confirm to you that we are not a balloon launching site for anybody. In terms of 2019, we didn't know how many people were on the island at that point. The new turbines, they resulted in a pretty significant disruption to island life, tore up our roads. 85% of the island was against them. The political masters for Ontario said, you're getting them anyways, because the premier said she wanted them, and that was the end of the discussion. To somewhat sweeten that pot, promises were made that $500K per year, so $500,000 a year, would be coming to the island in benefit money to somewhat offset the inconvenience. So it begged the question, what did we want to be when we grew up? How should this money be spent? The problem was there wasn't any hard data available. What were the wishes of the seasonal residents versus the permanent residents? In fact, how many were there? In the summer of 2019, we undertook a census. We called it a census. It was a survey of all island residents. We used 23 questions to collect the base data in terms of male, female, age ranges, things like that. We were trying to gauge the wishes and the directional desire of of islanders. We gave people the option to either answer on behalf of the entire household, or individuals could add in and have their own individual say. And depending upon the household, that was what happened. In terms of tools, primarily we did it online, SurveyMonkey, but it was also made available in paper format. As it turned out, we didn't need to do the paper format. We got enough answers coming in through SurveyMonkey. We did a few special things for the case of the seasonals. They were sent a postcard based on the tax rolls. So if their primary address for their tax bill was not the island, we assumed they were a seasonal, sent them a postcard with the website and the web link. Island residents, the permanent residents, received flyers. There were Facebook group postings. We posted it on the island website. We have a local community radio. They put out notices, and we put notices in the local island paper as well. We also provided a bit of an incentive. The local restaurant on the island, we got some gift certificates. Again, it was to encourage people to submit their response. We got maybe very lucky, but it took a lot of hard work. We had over 300 responses. When we looked at the data, and the next few foils are to give you an idea of the kind of results that we pulled in. More than half were permanent. We did see a lot of seasonal and part-time people showing up as well, as you can see from this graphic. And because of the way we did the questioning, unfortunately, a few people were able to skip the question. But it basically gave us enough info that we believe that the full survey and the set of answers we got back were all valid in terms of the trends that it gave us. In terms of the age range, showed us that the island was getting a lot older than we thought. Significant portion were age 65 plus. Interestingly, well, the way we did the age grouping, 0 to 13 was obviously up to the end of public school, grade 8. 14 to 18 were high school. 18 plus, 18 to 64 were basically considered working people. When we looked at gender, as is often the case for surveys like this, a larger portion of females answered versus males, but there were still significant numbers that we believe that there's not a bias in there. What did surprise us was the seasonality. We had assumed that seasonals would show up in the summer. In fact, we found out they show up in the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter in larger numbers than we had expected. We asked about how long somebody expected to stay on the island. Were they going to sell? 10% said they were going to sell within 5 years. 20% uncertain, which means potentially 30% of the island could turn over in 5 years. That was significant and quite unexpected. How were they in terms of the satisfaction on the island? Overwhelming, very satisfied. Literally 2 people said they were very dissatisfied, and that was it. So island life is definitely good. We asked them about how they thought the population should change over the next 10 to 15 years. Started to get a bit of a mixed response. The majority want a somewhat increase. There are some that wanted, very few that wanted a significant decrease, but there were some that did want a decrease. Not many said, I want a significant increase. And that's part of the trend that we saw on several things as we went along in terms of the degree of change that the island wanted. We asked them about the kind of island activities. Were they into conservation and ecology, home-based small businesses, service-based business, arts and culture, farming, tourism? What was it that they wanted more of or less of? And they were given the chance to say either they wanted more of this, about the same of it, or less of this. Ultimately, it came back and said, we don't want more hunting, fishing, or light manufacturing. And what became interesting was when you looked at the tourism specifically, there was a significant group that said, we want more, but there was a significant group that also said, we don't want it at all. And that's understandable in terms of the island. We get a lot of what we call birders here on the island who come especially during the winter to watch the wildlife. The problem is they're busy watching wildlife while driving down the middle of the road. I have watched two birders coming opposite directions, slam on the brakes within 6 feet of one another, nose to nose. I also personally have the experience of having to replace 10 fence posts a year ago because birders climbed my fence into the field to get a better shot of the snowy owls. So they can be a bit of a pain. We also asked them to talk about the island amenities and services. What did they need? What would be a good idea to have? They didn't have an opinion, or it wasn't important to them at all. And there were about 30 different things that we listed. This chart is of the ones that people said we needed this 20% or more. And to no big surprise for a lot of islands, it was the high-speed internet. But they also wanted things like a public washroom, ferry passes, paved roads, cashless ability to pay on the ferry. At the time of 2019, it would only take cash, no credit cards, no other way. And you could go down through the list. At the same time, resorted that one on the basis of you need it, plus it was a good idea, displaying over 60 cents. Made a few changes in terms of what was listed as the highly desirable things. For example, restaurant year-round moved up significantly in the list. Same with the year-round coffee shop. They didn't get a lot of need this, but there was a great, good idea was significant. You could then also sort the same list by the basis of not. What things were not important. So a gambling bingo hall casino was considered not important on the island, nor was a zoo or a petting zoo, nor was dry cleaners or a laundromat. So there were things like that. I must admit the one that did surprise me was no desire for a car wash. We're mostly dirt roads here and one trip to and from the ferry and you're covered in mud, especially after a rainstorm, but there was no desire to have a car wash. When we start looking though at the broader analysis, what was the difference between permanent versus seasonal residents? Seasonals are more likely to want a slight change or slight increase in population than the permanents. So the people who were living on the island full time kind of liked it the way it was. Seasonals are saying, yeah, let's get a few more people on the island. In terms of future directions, the permanents want more farming. Seasonals also want more farming, but statistically not as much. Probably not a surprise, because a lot of the people on the island are either, like I am, retired, or they're farming. The permanents, a group of them want more tourists, but a group of them definitely want less tourists. Seasonals want more tourists, but they don't have the resistance to tourists that the permanents have. Probably because they don't have to put up with the tourists all year round. Seasonals are significantly in favor of more arts and culture than permanents. Again, not particularly a surprising result. Permanents are more in favor of light manufacturing growth or small business than seasonals. But again, overall, that became a non-starter. To absolutely no surprise, permanents want paved roads. Seasonals thinks it's fine having it as a dirt road. If you look at based on age ranges, obviously the seniors are more than likely to be the people selling property in the next 5 years. They're also the ones that want to see a significant increase in population, but it's still pretty small numbers. Seniors also lean slightly more to the idea of a small population increase. Seniors want more agribusiness. They're definitely more in favor of conservation, and not surprisingly, rehab and retirement and hospice facilities as a thing to be developed on the island. Seniors want a library. We used to have one, lost it, was amalgamated with the one on the mainland. Seniors also have a greater desire to see a medical center. Seniors also thought Uber, Lyft, or any sort of taxi service on the island was a good idea. One of our challenges here is the island's fairly decent size. Getting around the island walking, if you're in the village, it's fine. If you're outside the village, you really need to have a car. Then you get the challenge, you get to the ferry, go across on the ferry, and what transportation services are on the other side. And one of the challenges is there aren't. You're on a highway road, and if you don't have a car, you've got to phone for a taxi and hope it comes. In the reverse, the working age people, there was strong support for a coffee shop. They were much more in favor of more frequent ferry trips. They wanted upgraded access to the beach. For them, having that annual ferry pass was a much greater need. Again, not surprising, they're going off island to work for the day. So having a ferry pass, an annual pass, made a lot of sense. The high school students, on the other hand, their strongest support was for an LCBO agent, which is for those down in the States, the Liquor Control Board. We asked people to tell us their top 3 issues, and we got over 475 issues identified. Top issues, broadly speaking, roads, ferry, high-speed internet. The numbers in brackets here are the number of people that mentioned it as one of their top 3. In 2019, it was one of the years of high water, so there had been a fair bit of flooding and erosion issues. The school is on an ongoing challenge to stay open. Are there enough kids to justify it? The turbines, just across the way, there's a gas plant. So there were some issues there. But there were some really big surprises to other things that people flagged as issues. The first one was community relations, actually the third highest. People recognized that having the turbines had significantly impacted community relationships on the island. Families themselves, were differing in terms of their relationships and their desires. Some were pro, some were con. No different than it would have been in the 1860s, whether you were North or South sympathizer. There was also a split between, are you a new islander or an old islander? Apparently, I can't become a true islander because I can't bury a grandparent here. True islanders are only the people that can have or could bury a grandparent here. The concern also was volunteer burnout. Like in any community, especially smaller communities, who are the people that are making the volunteer organizations happen? Are there enough of them? Are they burning out? What was interesting was the number of the people that expressed a desire that they wanted to heal the community because of the issue of the turbines. The store, we have one retail store on the island. The need for better hours and weekend service. It may be a convenience store, but when it opens at 9 or 9:30 in the morning and closes at 5, and it's not open on weekends, it became the butt of a lot of jokes on the island. There was a desire to have a gas station, a fuller grocery store, the year-round restaurant, coffee shops. So some of the things that we all see on the mainland, but don't have here on the island. There was also some comments about the demographics. People are recognizing that the island was aging, the need for young families, which had a direct relationship to the school. At least one individual remarked on their lack of dating opportunities. Another advocated for diversity of gender. Some of the other issues that popped up, housing affordability, no different than you'd see on mainland. Seniors issue, again, a lot of housing and service issues for seniors. At the time, we had a number of seniors on the island that were getting ready to transition to retirement homes. So housing for them, or suitable housing, became an issue. Tourism pops up a number of times, split between the problems with tourists, as I've explained that I've had, and finding activities and services for them. When you don't have a lot of stores and only one restaurant, it's also not necessarily great for them either. Looking for a rec center, trying to find a spot on the island. If you're a volunteer organization and you want to have a meeting, there aren't too many places. And that's one of the challenges we've found. Other major groupings, the Vibrancy Fund, which is what the benefit agreement that was supposed to give us $500,000, making sure we got our fair share, people speeding on the island. If we need a police to attend, it means you've got to file a claim or file a report. They've got to come across. If it's urgent, it's a problem. Our dump and garbage, we have garbage tags everybody has to purchase. Sometimes it's a little annoying because if you're on the mainland, you purchase the garbage tag the same as we do. The difference is yours gets picked up. We have to take ours to the dump. The broader thing of jobs and economy, taxes too high, land use. What do we do for public transportation once we get off the island because there are no buses along the route where it is? We may be on an island, but we have no marina. There is only one public dock with a 2-hour limit and no overnight. Yet we have dozens, literally, of sailboats anchoring in the couple of the bays here every weekend, but trying to bring them onto the island, there isn't a place to do so. Emergency services, if you need an ambulance, the ferry will go off schedule to bring the ambulance across. But again, isn't there something better we could do? Overall, what we found was that there was very little difference in the results based on age, based on residency, permanent or seasonal. All groups showed the same high satisfaction levels. It was really quite consistent across the entire community. Overall, let's change, but do so slowly. Not everybody wants change, but small changes were okay. The likelihood of property sales means that we're going to be changing whether we liked it or not. And I think people were realizing that. But a lot of that change has got to be done in the context of healing community relationships. And the change in the volunteer base may also affect what community activities happen. So in terms of impacts, we shared the results with the township, which is our municipal level, and all the different community groups so that they could use hard data to back up their grant requests, make decisions about what they're doing. The Back Kitchen, our restaurant, their 5-year plan was developed that fall, and it called for opening the restaurant year-round. The convenience store expanded its hours. It now offers a propane exchange, and it started selling beer and spirits, which is now its major item to sale. A food services exec quit her job and became a successful real estate agent. I won't claim that our survey directly affected that decision, but she was part of the core team that helped build this survey and execute it. The ferry service went ahead and instituted cashless payments. The implementation was probably more COVID driven, but it still happened as a result, and they had started working on it as a result of our survey. Unfortunately, the municipality clawed back most of the benefit money, and they cap how much we can have, but they dip into that for whenever there is a municipal project that they believe affects the whole municipality, so we have to pay 25% out of our share. We're not thrilled, but it's better than not having anything. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So some tips for success. If you're thinking of doing a survey, your marketing is probably absolutely critical for increasing the participation rate. The suggestion is focus on why it's important, not just that it's out there and you want people to fill it out. Tell them why it's important for them to fill out and get their opinion included. Use every channel you've got available: print, social media, radio, internet, mail. Also, don't discount incentives that are going to help your local businesses. Get them to donate prizes or gift certificates or whatever. It all helps. We used the tax rules, especially when it came to the seasonal residents. That was critical. We're also hoping that next time the terminal ferry boards signs will be able to be used to remind people on a daily basis as they're crossing to fill it out. Again, that's just another channel. You've got to look at when you time your survey. When are the holiday periods? When are you going to get the most number of people on the island that are willing to pay attention to it? I'd also be suggesting don't have it longer than 3 or 4 weeks. Otherwise, the urgency to get it completed is lost. We definitely saw, in terms of the response rate, in the first 4 or 5 days it was out there, we got a significant number. And then it dropped off rapidly. As we then did a sort of a second push, that's when we got the other batch just before the close date. When you're generating questions, what worked for us was generating more questions than you could possibly ask. Get some feedback on additional options, additional questions from your group. Don't make any assumptions on the results. Make sure they're neutrally phrased, and then start eliminating questions that might be interesting, but which really aren't actionable. It hurts. There are a few things I'd love to have asked in the last one, but I wasn't going to, they were for interest as opposed to changing what sort of actions we could take. The problem is if it's too long a survey, people will not complete it, or they get partway through and then won't finish it off. I'll come back to it later, and then they don't. We use SurveyMonkey, but Google Forms and other tools work equally well. I don't think paper really is that big a deal anymore. We got enough answers coming in through the online system. It is critical to validate before publishing it. The people who are drafting the questions have to get a chance to look at it to say, yeah, that's the question I drafted. We had a couple cases where the people who were inputting the data or inputting questions for us said, oh, well, let's combine these two questions. And in doing so, screwed up the analysis. The people who are going to do the end analysis should have the final say on the sanity check of the questions that go out. So we're going to be doing another survey this summer. A lot has changed. The pandemic, a lot of new people on our island. We're supposed to be getting a new electric ferry in another couple of months. See how that works. But at the same time, there's still a lot of the same people here and a lot of the same issues. Will we be successful? I don't know. Time is going to tell. So on that note, back to you, Will.
Thanks, Kirk. I had a lot of questions come in on the chat, and you've answered quite a few of them as we went along. I'm confused about the government structure there. The Amherst Island has no local government itself. They're part of some mainland-based municipality.
Government structure by nature is supposed to be confusing, but yes, you're quite correct. The levels of government that we have municipally, our lowest level of government is a township, Loyalist Township, which is a bunch of mainland communities and ourselves. They were amalgamated into one municipality for basic services umpteen years ago. We used to be 35 years ago, a separate entity, but we are no longer. There is a county that is a higher level of municipality that does ambulance service and some of the tourism development things. Above that, there is the province and then the federal. So those are the 4 levels of government we've got to deal with.
So going from the island, you're part of a township that has how many people in it? What percentage of the vote do you have within that municipality?
I'm going to answer that question 2 ways. We are a ward system here. There are 3 wards. Ward 1, which is the island, has 1 councillor. Ward 2, the town of Bath, has 1 counselor. Ward 3, which is the town of Amherst View and a few other pieces in the mainland, have 3 counselors, plus there's a deputy mayor and a mayor. So we have 1 vote directly on the municipal council. From a population point of view,
That's really my question, Kirk.
we're a nit.
Yeah.
Because we've got, basically 600-700 people, well, less than that once you take away the people that can't vote. But we've got that right to vote. The people in Amherst View, Ward 3, for example, has 15,000 people. So they feel that we've got too much of a vote because we've got 1 vote on council.
Right. Good. So it looks to me like you formed this Amherst Island Community Alliance as sort of a way to kind of get yourself organized and then sort of deal with the outside world. Is that right?
True. In some ways, the Community Alliance is somewhat like a business improvement area. That was how we started out, and sort of a bit of an umbrella group. There are all sorts of volunteer organizations now. Our restaurant, in fact, is a volunteer-run organization. We have a women's institute. We have a men's society. There is a group that's trying to put together a medical clinic. So there's lots of different things that are there as volunteer organizations. Anything not captured by that group or those groups, the Community Alliance tries to tie the groups together, make it a broader community. So the Amherst Island website, for example, is run by the Community Alliance.
Yeah. It looks to me like the impact of your survey. So the stuff that raised my eyebrows was getting a bunch of the businesses to pay more attention to what the needs and interests were of their customers. And so that was a great service right there.
We think so.
Yeah. So how much of the 500,000 did you ever get back to the island?
At the moment, the municipality has capped us at 25% and no more coming back to the island. It goes through a process of having to go up to Township Council for approval. It's still in its infancy, to be honest. We'll see. I don't think we've given, other than stuff going to the township itself, less than 100,000 has actually come to the island.
And yet you've got all the turbines.
Yep.
My grandson says that's not fail.
Yeah. Well,
how did you finance the survey?
Self-funded. We did it as best we could. Somebody had a license for the Survey Monkey, which was our major cost. The Alliance ate the cost of the mailing and the other things. We did the full survey. In fact, budgeted for this year to redo it, including a cost for the software. We're doing it for about $1,200, $1,500. So it's the cost of people time than anything else.
Labor of love.
Yeah.
Betsy asks, how did you ensure that only island residents or the seasonal or year-round did the survey, that it wasn't just sort of open and people started filling in multiple ballots?
It's not perfect. The original plan was that they would enter their roll number from their tax bill, but for privacy reasons, that got shot down at the last minute. Because we weren't a government agency doing that. Betsy, to be honest, it's not perfect. On the other hand, the likelihood of others outside the island community having a lot of time there to fill it out. Don't think it's going to happen, because you'd have to be on our Facebook group, getting one of the postcards or whatever. So it wasn't likely that you were going to find out about it. The other thing we could do is we also could see where the IP address was that people were coming from. So to a large extent, we could see if there was a real problem. Didn't see that happening.
I'm interested in knowing whether you got any different answers, or how you controlled for this question of whether somebody was answering for their household or for themselves.
It was an actual question on the survey. Was the
Right, but then how did you use that in analyzing the results? Any differences or?
Yeah, because when they answered for the household, then you could, they'd already said, these are how many people are in my household. You could then do some approximations across. So I've got 5 people in my household. I'm answering this question on behalf of my household. You got a weighting of 5. If somebody came in and said, I'm just answering for myself, you got a weighting of 1.
But you didn't say in terms of the interest in getting high-speed internet that we'd take that one person's vote and count it 5 times.
No, yeah. So in the case, exactly. So in the case of, if my issue is need this for internet, high-speed internet, and they were answering for the household and there were 5 people, they got 5 check marks. If they were just answering for myself, they got 1 check mark. It, in terms of the perfectness of the scientific analysis, I will happily admit it wasn't perfect. But in terms of
Never is. Never is.
Yeah, but in terms of the general trend, and when you start looking at the answers, either before weighting or after weighting, it didn't really change things. So on that basis, we're pretty confident that the data we got was indicative of the desires of the community.
Mike Kutcha has commented when they did the survey on Madeline Island in 2022, they weren't concerned about the visitors. They knew they were getting very good, strong responses from the year-round and seasonal residents, and a few of the people who happened to be over there for the day didn't worry too much about.
Yeah,
just a few that might muck it up a little bit, but it wasn't going to change the results.
Yeah, I'd agree with Michael. I've seen the data he did. They did a great survey, and you know, the number of people that said they were visitors doing ours was a very, very small percentage. So I would agree. Visitors aren't going to skew it.
When do you have overnight accommodations on the island?
There are a couple of Airbnbs. At the time, there was one B&B beyond, and there is the lodge. So we have a couple of small places, but there aren't any major hotels.
So with that and a sort of a volunteer restaurant, you're not capturing a lot of money for the people who are just short-term visitors. Is that right?
Correct. There are a couple of art galleries, artisan studios, but basically no.
Yeah, they might buy a painting, but they don't have to pay an entry fee.
Correct.
I'm going to read this one on the fly from Ned. I'm a Madeline Island person, curious to know who shared the Madeline Island survey you did. Sorry, I'm glad they did. It was Mike Kutchka, Ed, and I wasted everybody's time by getting you guys talking to each other. Sorry, my apologies. What about this list? I mean, sidewalks isn't anything that would show up on a Washington. How did you put together the list of things that people could rate?
Not by any scientific method. It was as much a case of sitting around the kitchen table with a bunch of people saying, what possible amenities and services don't we have that we might like to have, or that we'd like people to comment on? And, you know, just as easily sidewalks, we have sidewalks in the village, but nothing beyond that, because you don't have sidewalks between farms. But when you start looking at all the things that anybody might ever have mentioned, and that's part of the reason of you come up with a list, bring it back a week later and say, what else do you want to add to this, guys? And somebody says, I had this idea in the shower, why don't we add these 3 things? And you add it to the list.
In the kitchen table were your members on the Amherst Island Community Alliance, right?
Correct.
So people who really knew the place and what they've heard. Good Lord, I was going to say you heard at the bar, but you don't have a bar, do you?
Unfortunately, that's one of the things we don't have here is a bar.
Was it on the list? I would have voted, because that's where people get together and coffee and beer. Those are the 2 ways that your community communicates with each other, with itself. I think our time is up, Kirk, and we're going to kick it back to the folks at GLIA to do some wrap up things. So is it Peter or Matt, which of you?
There we go. All right. I really want to thank you guys, both of you, for your expertise today, everything that you did. Kirk, with this survey is amazing. As I've told you before, I was incredibly inspired by the work you did and your group did with the Amherst Islands Community Alliance to be able to execute this. I feel like this is something that's a valuable tool for all of our islands. And, you know, when we think about what we can do to be able to better inform those who are making decisions, this is the tool that we need. So, you know, if people didn't get their question answered, please email me again, phouston@stewardshipnetwork.org. We're going to have this available as a recording, and we'll be able to send that out. And they do also have the results of the survey that Kirk sent to me. So if you were interested in seeing his analysis of results, I can share that with you if that's all right, Kirk. But again, I really appreciate all the hard work that you and the folks on Amherst Island did. And Will, thank you so much for helping to provide some great insights here today, because, you know, this is not an easy thing to do, but it is so valuable. And, you know, when we, you know, hear different islands talking about what their critical areas of interest are, knowing for certain what your community wants, and even the visitors that come and spend time there, is kind of critical to our decision-making process. So thank you very much, everybody. And again,
can I just ask one question before we wrap up? This has been gnawing at me. Kirk, you said you're going to do another survey. Is it going to be different from this one? And if so, how?
It will be different, but many aspects will be the same, because we'll be looking for trends.
Okay, great.
There are things that have changed, but some of the broader questions of what direction do you want the island going will be the same. The list of amenities and services will be different, because some of it have happened, some of them haven't.
Yep.
We've also indicated to some of the local groups if they want to add a question or two to help them. For example, the medical center, how often do you go off island for medical appointments?
That's great. We'll be looking forward to seeing your questionnaire and seeing your results. Thanks again.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. And we really appreciate all that you did. So again, if you have any questions, or if you want to be in touch with me, my address is again, phouston@stewardshipnetwork.org. All right. Thank you very much. See you all soon. Thank you for joining us and have a good afternoon.